Welcome to Breaking Barriers, where we delve into the realms of health and performance. I'm your host, Neil Bester, and in each episode, we embark on a journey of conversation with diverse individuals in the health and performance space. From experts pushing the boundaries of science to everyday athletes sharing their inspiring stories. Join me as we explore the keys to unlocking your full potential. Legend, let's hit the intro and then we'll get started. Cool guys, welcome to Breaking Barriers. It's episode 5. Today I'm joined by a really cool guest, BigAl, goes by BigAl. Once upon a time podcaster himself, just found out also clothing lines. He's the man behind Submission Kings, caused a lot of drama, so to say, in the MMA field a few years back. And reason I've got him on here is just because I watched a few of his videos. I wasn't as immersed in the MMA scene, JITSU scene, but over the last 2 or 3 years, training the guys in the community, the JITSU guys specifically, and now recently of some MMA fighters, there's more of an interest and just understanding how the different organizations work and just hearing it from the man himself, behind the scenes, what it takes to set up, what are the political agendas, issues, because it happens in, as I've spoken on previous podcasts, in all fitness, sporting codes. So I hope that was a good intro. Big up. He was giving me the pep talk prior.
Yeah, infamous, famous to some degree, I guess, in these circles. Yeah, just how it all started for me, pretty much like yourself, like a podcast. In fact, my intention was never to dive like knee deep into MMA, but subjects of interest, right?
Yes.
That was how that kind of started, and naturally just gravitated towards MMA athletes, training jiu-jitsu, training a bit of boxing. In my younger days, it was just naturally all around me, And then as time went on, as these things go, you get involved, you see things you like, you see things you don't like, and somewhere along the line made the decision to speak about quite freely the things that I didn't agree with. And the opinions became quite dangerous as we went on. But yeah, that was it. Like MMA and combat sports was a natural love for me, and it always will be. But yeah, since you mentioned previous podcasts, I kind of withdrawn a little bit from the MMA space and thrown a lot of that love and passion into jiu-jitsu for many reasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah, reasonably inept introduction for myself.
No, because we were talking just prior, and everything you were telling me, I was like, we needed to get started because
Sure.
I was hearing it, and I was like, we have to save it for everybody. But you just said now that's pretty much how you got into the scene, podcasting. As I said, I remember just watching you when I wasn't even in the industry, so to say, and you're putting out some good content, like talking about dealing or working with a lot of the big guys.
Sure.
Just seen Trickus, now he's won the UFC title, he's come back. So you're hanging around all these guys right in the beginning, from the get-go, which is pretty cool to see that journey.
Yeah. So like I said, it was never really actually part of the plan. I reached a stage where I had played rugby at a very, not a high level, but I went to a very rugby-orientated school, played first team rugby, tried to like make things happen after that, and then kind of dwindled away from rugby, and it was kind of like the next best thing, right? And as you got into jiu-jitsu and you realize how hard it was and how you had to like, people always say like jiu-jitsu saved my life kind of thing, It's not actually like necessarily the jiu-jitsu, it's the want to get better at it, and you can't just get better at it. You've got to be physically fitter, you've got to get physically stronger, you've got to get mentally stronger. And so this like search on ways to get better at jiu-jitsu actually started all of this. And then you started to like get involved in watching MMA, and you realize these athletes, as you're starting to learn, or you have a better understanding of what they have to go through 12 weeks prior and 12 years prior to get onto the stage, and we all sit and watch, So I found at that time MMA athletes to be like this mysterious creature that was just astounding to me. Like, how are these people doing this? Like 2-a-days, strength and conditioning, recovery, sleep, nutrition, like all of this stuff was going into it. And you're kind of like, well, in some kind of sense, I have to do this if I want to get better at jiu-jitsu. Obviously not 2-a-days all of the kind of stuff. But the recovery, you're interested. The how are these guys eating? How are they training? How are they splitting the lifting? How are they, and all of this stuff. And never mind all of that. There's this whole like mental battle going on in between, you know. So through this kind of like search and discovery of jiu-jitsu, I was mesmerized by MMA athletes, you know. Like, I mean, we all grew up with a bit of boxing and stuff, and you understood, you know, like Rocky punching the meat, and there was all this crazy stuff and raw eggs and whatever. But this like, I had this like sense of like a yearning to understand it better, and it kind of drew me towards the athletes. And I think my approach was always quite honest, and I think that's why I was allowed behind the door quite a lot. You know, I spent a lot of time with Don Madge, which was a great case. I mean, and then at some point I decided I'd be a independent filmmaker. Not very well. But because I was training in the same gym as Don for the most part, I got to see a lot of this stuff. And it wasn't only Don, there was a lot of guys around, you know. But we filmed the making of Don Madge, and we got to see the guy who's coming in having a laugh every day to signing a fight, and that all changes. So from the day that happened all the way to the UFC in Abu Dhabi, like I was with him a lot, you know, and actually traveled with the guys to Abu Dhabi. So I got to see a lot of these guys. And Dricus at the time, I'll never forget watching, I think it was UFC 50, Dricus versus Martin van Staden, which was, you know, it was one of those like pivotal moments in our story for MMA where I think Martin had like a dash or an anaconda that was really, really deep, and that could have changed the whole trajectory of things, you know what I mean? Especially for Martin.
Completely.
You know, so, yeah, just rambling on. But, you know, there was this whole thing. I was very personally fond of MMA, but more mesmerized by the athletes, you know what I mean? And we had, at that time, I think about like 2016, where I really got started was, like we were about to hit the pinnacle of that MMA scene. The EFC was just flying. You know, Soulja Boy had just gone to the UFC, I think, at that point, or was about to go to the UFC. You had all of these guys now that are quite big names that were on the up, you know, and it was just a massive time. There were internationals, big internationals coming out here. The promotion was like really, really thriving. It was just a great time for MMA, you know. And I kind of figured that no one was kind of creating the content around it, you know, and I started writing like a blog or something, and I was like, dude, I can hardly speak English. Like, how are you typing? You know what I mean? Yeah. Just it's like, someone's like, yeah, exactly. It wasn't even ChatGPT, dude. So, you know, like this whole thing kind of happened quite organically, but it was a good time. And it was my outlook on it then, and it still is much to this day, is we've got an insane amount of talent here. They, to some degree, aren't getting some kind of platform that they probably need. Barring the UFC, the platform was amazing for them, but there was nobody like telling us who they really were, you know. And that was kind of like an emerging thing internationally. We wanted to know who these athletes were and what made them tick from a human perspective. You know what I mean? This is still a guy who's still got a mom and a dad and a sister and an auntie and an uncle, and likes to do things on his day off, you know. Yeah, man. So it was like a very like self-finding journey. And this whole thing started from like this search to get better at jiu-jitsu. That was really how it started.
That's super interesting in the sense that you'll see a massive trend now. I'm on the fitness side, the strength conditioning Instagram, where all these influencers, to say, big guys, James Smith, I'm sure you've read his book, those guys, Oli Omega, that are popping, but all immersing themselves into jiu-jitsu, which I think is the discipline, just, as you say, getting better. And I've tapped my toes in the water with jits. I'm a bit scared to get injured, to be honest. The boys are always like, when are you back at open mat? But there you got the answer. I don't want to lose an ACL or MCL or a shoulder.
They can fix them now, dude.
No, exactly. But no, that's super interesting in the sense from getting better to just building a whole brand from it, so to say.
Sure. Yeah, it's like, and I know you want to get to those kind of questions of what really happened from there. You know, like everything you get, and not to say I'm perfect or I'm not biased or I didn't see things through a certain lens, but it got to the point where, And especially we kind of COVID hit, there was really kind of these like rumblings that as you got deeper into the system, you saw more and more like the darker side of the sport, and not the athletes, not the promotions for the most part, but the administration of the sport was, in my opinion, and still is my opinion, and it happens a lot. And we were speaking about some examples. The administration of behind sport, especially niche sport, where there's like not masses of government funding and that kind of stuff. For whatever reason, guys, and this is the way I see it, there's a pile of guys who are involved in the sport. Maybe they've got a gym, they've like a coach on the outskirts somewhere. They maybe can't create, they're never going to create champions, you know what I mean? Like maybe an amateur champion here and there, but they're never going to get a professional champion, or they're never going to get a guy that's going to go overseas and really do well, that's going to look good on their brand as a coach or as a gym. So the next best thing for them is to create like some kind of relevancy. And how do you do that? You take control of a section of the sport, right? So you get involved with the federation, for example, and you like work your way through the federation. Look, you're still doing hard work. You're still got to do the yards and put in the work. Maybe you get into like a recognized international body. You're like the African president. But then you have this like control seat. And what you see most of the time with these guys is that the second they've got that control is that there's not a contingency in place to put the best people for the job in that space. The reaction is to put the person closest to you in that space, to keep the control and to keep the power. Like any sort of political outlook, you know what I'm saying?
Almost our government, basically.
100%. And honestly, like, without ever saying it, that was really the analogy that I would make. If you want to look at some of the governing bodies, just look at the government. It's exactly the same. It's different people, but they do things exactly the same.
Works, the whole system, 100%. Completely.
So it becomes like this whole like control factor between like an old boys club, and there's no space for new blood. And the second there was ever new blood, it would just fall apart. Because the second someone would get too powerful or maybe get too much momentum, they would make sure that person gets ousted. You know what I mean? And they tried the same with me. Obviously, back and forth over a long time, and eventually to the point where it's like you like my partner Justin always says, you're fighting for a job that you're not getting paid for. Like it seems so silly, but it's like this drive of passion that you want to effect change. And eventually you get to the point where you realize, maybe I didn't affect the change I'd hoped for, but I definitely made them change the way they do things. And I definitely made people look at them differently. And I definitely made people realize that there's a wrong and a right way to do these things, But unfortunately for me personally, MMA just became very toxic. The environment became quite toxic. And you still see that internationally. You saw, what is his name now? I'm drawing a blank. Big UFC John Anik said the same thing. Like he literally was at the point where he's like, he doesn't know if he wants to carry on doing this anymore because the space is so toxic. And it's the same thing like what I spoke to you about with, for whatever reason, like when it comes to combat sports, there's like this air of like alpha and bravado and like, these athletes are like so mesmerizing. People are drawn to that, you know what I mean? And the craziest thing about MMA compared to any other sport, like let's say you decide you're going to steer your podcast towards rugby.
Yes.
You can't DM Victor Matfield and be like,
straight and be like, bro, jump
on my podcast. MMA is different. That's how, especially back in those days, like it was easy. You'd drop Drickus a DM, like, hey, my name's Al, and be like, sure, dude, no problem. You have access to these athletes. That's the craziest thing. They're still just like walking among you. You're going to go have a conversation, you know what I mean? Like you generally have more access to these athletes. Whereas like big team sports is not the same thing. So everyone kind of feels like they're so close to these people, these like crazy, like these crazy athletes that are just on this crazy pedestal. But it does attract a bit of craziness. That's the reality.
That's the thing is, like you say that, but it's completely true. We got Eddie now in the EFC, and I'm literally telling him, bro, the only way you're going to fast track your career is if you build your brand.
Yeah.
They want to see you on Instagram. They want to see what you're doing, where you're training, what you're eating, exactly what you were busy saying earlier. So you're just chasing the likes, essentially. Chasing those followers, chasing that's the chase.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, you have to go try and knock somebody out and put them down.
And with the chase comes, not everybody likes you, you know what I mean? That's the reality. And like, depends on how you look at that. You know, in the beginning, I think for anybody, it's pretty hectic. You're like, wow, fuck this person, why are they saying that? You know what I mean? Like, what are you saying that for? You know what I mean? Like, why are you saying those things? But it takes like a bit of time to get used to those kind of things, you know? That's the reality. But that is the game, right? And it's literally the most vulnerable sport in the world. There's nowhere to hide. There's no place. You get sparked in front of, doesn't matter how big that crowd is or who's watching, you get sparked in front of 20 people. I don't think anybody wants to do that. You know what I mean? You lay out there flat on the ground, and what's going to happen in that chase when you get back to your socials and this place where you're trying to build this brand? It's just abuse, dude. You know what I mean? Like it's a tough game. So that's also why, like, being so passionate about the sports, why you take those things so seriously. Like, you want that to fall into the right hands. You know what I mean? You want those athletes to have the best representation on every playing field there is. You know, that's kind of where it stems from. Like, you don't want a dude who's sitting as a president of an organization and everybody in his board is his mate or his bra or his uncle. Or so when like time comes to vote to effect change, his affiliation make up 70% of the voting core. You know what I mean? You know which way they're going to vote. So like, that's why all of these things get amplified, because there's so much. These athletes are so vulnerable in what they do. It's still one of the craziest things in the world to go and do, you know. So like, those are the driving factors of why, like, I was very outspoken on a lot of topics. You know what I mean? And that's really the driving force. I was like, whether the athletes, not everyone's going to like you. That's the reality of life, right? And it's. No, that age-old saying is like, if you've pissed somebody off, it means you've stood up for something you believed in, you know? That's still the way I see it. But it's like, there's so much at stake for these athletes. It was like, my feeling was always that we want 100% the right people on every position doing the best for the sport, you know? And I just don't think that that's been the case. Maybe it's gotten better now, but I don't know.
Touching on that, obviously the whole political scene, the agenda, the organization, at the end of the day, you got your athletes that need to compete.
Sure.
So obviously training these athletes and stuff, the mental state, you can see they're just normal humans. Like, if I tell you, okay, now you got thick skin, you've been through the most. But back then, like you say, someone calls you out, says something funny. My girlfriend said I say like too much. I get a little bit touched. But basically, in your experience, how did you see how this whole setup actually influenced athletes?
Yeah, so like, again, like, I think combat sports athletes in general are just, they're the 1%ers, right? They don't always fit into the mold, but there's still feelings there, you know. So a lot of stuff starts to affect them, right? For many reasons, you know. Like, you might have a goal of going to fight overseas, like win, lose or draw. That's what you want to do. You might not be getting there because your coach might not be settled up to the right person. You know what I'm saying? That's going to have an effect, you know, because like, how do you get past that? How much noise do you need to make, both in your performance and everything else, to get into that position? That starts to affect, like, you take a guy like, here's a good example, like a guy like Lutando Biko, amazing fighter. The feedback for Lutando was he needs more finishers, you know what I mean? So like, in his mind, in his camp, he's like working towards finding a finish. Maybe like a grounding out into a position to get a submission is not really what he's looking for. He's really looking for a knockout. That's not how he's built.
Yes.
You know what I mean? He wasn't designed to knock people out.
Yeah.
He's designed to make you go aerial. Same like BK. Those two kids fought, I think they fought each other like one of them was their debut. Best matchmaking ever. One of the craziest fights you'll ever see. But because of the styles are so similar, it was like, as an enthusiast, it was amazing to see. But that's not what the people want to see. And, you know, like the promotions sell knockouts. That's what they sell. That's the reality, right? So all of those kind of things start to wane in on your performance in reality, because you're like, in your head, you're thinking, I need to knock this person out. Not because you have to win, but you're like, I need to get viral. I need to like prove that oak wrong, and I need to like get overseas, and this is what they want. So like all of these things start to wane in. And the same with like a political funnel. Like if you're aware of it and conscious of it, which I don't think most athletes really are too bothered about, it definitely starts to, all of those factors start to like funnel into your performance, right? You know you've got to go out, and if you're like a wrestler, you've got to knock this dude out, you know what I mean? You've got to go against everything that you've trained for. Like it definitely plays a toll.
Completely. Like, no, that's actually crazy to actually think about it. It's just wrestler, the analogy, or JITSU trying to like now knock a out. It's like throwing, I guess, for a Chris in the or to see Red.
And it's mixed martial arts, right?
Yeah.
It's mixed martial arts. Like
So,
we are watching mixed martial arts. Like we're not watching knockout arts, but that's the reality. You know what I mean? That's the nature of the beast. People want to see blood. They want to see knockouts. And if that's not your style, look at like, who's a good example? Leon Edwards, but that's kind of changing. Khabib transcended a generation, so he was a bit different. But like Khabib was never like a massive pay-per-view star until you added Conor because of the style. You know what I mean? But the story outsold the style. You know, and these kind of things go on. There's so many guys who are like, even now, who maybe have like a very low knockout rate, have to do so much more to get the recognition or to get a title shot or to get a, you know, and that's politics really.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's really, it's look at Bilal Muhammad, possibly still not getting a title shot. The dude's like on like an 11-5 win streak or whatever it is. But because his style is like very grind you out and win by decision, I'm like, sorry, dude.
We want the fireworks.
Yes, you're not going to sell.
We literally.
So like that's politics at the end of the day. You understand the promotion's a business, but what do you do?
So now you've obviously fought that battle. You're telling me the story, Sub Kings. How did that come about?
So two parts. The first part I was telling you about how me and Justin Ferrier met. Justin Ferrier obviously being the initial founder of Sub Kings. Our relationship was based on the hatred for very similar people. I said dislike, let's say. But that kind of started, he was a judge at the EFC, and I thought he was one of the better ones. So he was kind of a guy, I would see a decision, and before I said anything, I would go sit with him and be like, tell me what you saw, you know what I mean? Like, why this person and not that person? Or like a robbery would happen, he'd be like, yeah, dude, I don't know what those are just seeing, kind of thing. And he was very honest and very approachable. And then I can't remember what the fight was, but I want to say it was maybe some international guy, and I don't know. The decision was shoddy. And so these guys were like going at it online, like 3 blind mice. So Justin was like, he's going to get on a plane, come here onto the podcast, and we can discuss it. You know what I mean? It was Brandon Katz was the main antagonizer. And then Brandon either forgot or didn't rock up, and me and Justin said, just talking about reffing and judging and MMA, and that's kind of our relationship started. And then he was fighting a bit of a battle with MMA SA. He was the guy that we were kind of targeting to take over as a president. And then by hook or by crook was removed from the organization. At the same time, I kind of fell into some trouble with them as well. Very similar kind of outlook, that we had both seen some things that we didn't agree with, and there was a lot of, in our opinions, maladministration going on. And basically just asking all the right kind of questions to get you into trouble, you know? And that's how it kind of happened. And then I think just before COVID or something like that, Justin and his partner at the time, William Oberholzer, had come up with an idea to host a grappling event that would raise funds for MMA athletes. So for those of you that don't know, for our athletes to go represent their country, they don't get a single rand.
Self-funded.
Or self-funded.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So then you've got this kind of thing where there's no money coming in. These are maybe 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, maybe 24-year-old kids who's committed to a sport, who can't earn money because they're amateurs in the sport, now has to go fly to Albania or Bahrain or wherever with 0 rand, you know what I'm saying? So, and the administration, maybe these days a little bit better, they did nothing to really kind of raise money, or they did very little. So his idea was to create all kinds of like fundraising opportunities, one of them being a grappling situation, and that was where Submission Kings was initially born. And I think they hosted one event, and Warren King was the winner of the one absolute. Luke Griffith was the winner of the other absolute. And Jeannie Kutzer was the one of the ladies absolute. Jeannie's the absolute boss. And then, if I remember correct, COVID kind of hit, so that was kind of put on a back burner. And at the same time, I had taken on like fundraising for athletes in my own accord. And it was like random stuff, you know, like I had access to a lot of UFC assets that people couldn't get, so like posters and stuff like that, you know. So I was like raffling off like kind of like memorabilia or whatever we could get, and like had raised a fair amount of money in like a little quick time, like 15, 16, 17 grand. That could pay somebody's flight. And then Justin, as he does, decided that it's not good enough, and we should start a official NPO, which we did. And that's kind of where Sub Kings really started to hit its stripes, you know. So the whole thing was, we created the SA Mixed Martial Arts Foundation to raise money for these athletes, and Sub Kings was going to be our major tool. The first worlds that happened was like this whole thing where what we wanted to do was hand over money to the athletes. We didn't want to give it to the federation. We wanted it to go direct to the athletes for reasons. We wanted to cut them out. We've raised this money. If we have to, if you guys can send us an invoice for like tracksuits, whatever, we'll pay that invoice. Cool, but it had to be like all hush-hush. They didn't want to know that I was involved with
helping raise money to support athletes. Okay.
Correct. So I was just like, what are we talking? But anyway, so what had happened was Justin had said he wants me on board because he thinks that I can help get this to where it needs to be. And I was like, I'm keen. COVID happened. Now we had to find a venue. We had to find, you know, because he had said we have to go to Joburg. That's where the numbers are. Cool. I started looking around. How do we do this? And I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I was sent to a guy down the road from my house who had a warehouse. He was doing like production stuff, and I went there, and he was like, you know, we were talking about, look, we want to stream a tournament, you know, like, can you help? And he's like, no, definitely you can help. And they were trying to like talk about venues, and he's like, well, why don't you just do it here in this warehouse? He's like, dude, this literally, we can broadcast anything from here. We've got everything here. And I was like, oh, okay, sounds like a great idea. So the first event back, we rolled out the mats in his warehouse.
Tell me now, you obviously went on hold COVID. Was this mid-COVID?
So it was kind of like, you still had to have limitations inside and masks and all of this kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. For jiu-jitsu, right? Okay. You know what I'm saying? So like we rolled out these judo mats that belonged to William, to the point that it was like literally if you were inside, where the seats were, your feet were on the mat. Like it was so tight in there. And then Sunday came and it was the kids, and it was just chaos, dude. It was absolute chaos. So I was like, we cannot do that again. We need to move. But at the same time that conversation happened, I had this, Justin had this idea to do like, his whole thing was to do like provincial, like a Curry Cup kind of thing. And I'd had this idea to do a quintet, a gym quintet. Let's figure out who the best gym is in the country, right? And immediately, obviously, we knew that if we could get it right, we could play off between the old FFM-CIT kind of rivalry and whoever else is keen to jump in. You know, like we've got Henzo's and Pesfa and like some really big gyms. So I called Justin, and I'm standing on the top of the stairs overlooking this thing, and I'm like, I've got an idea. I was like, I think we should have a quintet in here, and we'll stream it from here. And that's kind of how it happened. And he was like, okay.
Let's go.
You know what I mean? So like, he was like to say that Sub Kings WTA, especially as you know it now, is my dream, which definitely is not the truth. Again, it was kind of just organic, you know what I mean? Like we started this thing like, let's do a quintet, you know, like they do overseas, like we just have a quintet. And, you know, so the quintet was a massive success, but it was a huge disaster. No one knew what was going on. Like people were getting so cross with me as if I'd been doing this for 25 years. Like I should just know what I'm doing, you know? But it was insane. The event, like obviously we were very fortunate. We had a lot of good people around us. We knew of a lot of good people to contact and who to help and who would point us in the right direction. And we slowly built up this team, like I'm talking about a back of house team. And after the first quintet, I was immersed in my own world, and like I had my gym and I knew a few people. I'd gone to open mats all around. I was very friendly, obviously with the podcast, had been to a lot of gyms and knew a lot of people. And I was like, I came to a realization, like, I was like, Dill, like literally, this is what he does. Like, there are people here that literally just do jiu-jitsu. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just in my world, there's a lot of these guys around. So as we started speaking, like, and word got out, people would, hey, you got to get this guy, you got to get that guy, you got to get this guy, you got to get that guy. And obviously, like, I was competing for a little while and knew a lot of these people. Like, me and Dill had been, like, competing, obviously in different weight classes, but from, like, a very similar time, you know what I mean? I knew of Dill because I remember he baseball bat choked a teammate of mine, like, out cold, and I was just, damn.
I think he actually showed me that video.
Yeah, I was like, damn.
Because he gave me a gi to use in my first comp. He's like, bro, watch this video because that's what I used.
Yeah. Yeah, so like, and then all of these things started to happen again very organically. And then after the quintet, we're kind of like scratching heads, like, do we do this again? Like, where are the legs? And then Justin had said to me, he's like, if we're going to do this, we've got to change this up a little bit. So we knew, like, for whatever reason in combat sports, there always has to be an acronym, like EFC, UFC. And Justin was like, winner takes all, WTA. And that's like, he's a funny dude. You got to speak to him one day. He'll explain all of these things in his own way. He's like, that'll have legs, and it was perfect. So the whole time this was kind of happening, we were kind of playing with this whole winner takes all kind of thing from the start. And then I think I had seen, it had been done here before, an 8-man bracket. I can't remember exactly how they had set it out. I think it was Submission Quest, something like that. But it had been done here before. And it was like, then that idea started to become prevalent. And like, okay, but now we've got to kind of take this further, So we all of a sudden went from these like outcast MMA dudes to raising money with a jiu-jitsu tournament to like a full-on TV production, sporting events company, which was never part of the plan, and like kind of like thrusted in to this position where we had a chance to change the dynamic of the sport forever, in my opinion, And that's kind of how that all happened. Like, it was never like, it's not one of those stories where I was like 16 and I was like, I'm
gonna have sub kings, and that's my promotion, and I'm gonna be the president and control everything. Yeah.
It was just like, again, like, jiu-jitsu was obviously always realistically my first love. It was something I'd been training through the whole time, and like, moved around a bit, and obviously through MMA, had got to meet a whole pile of people and like really, really, really cool people. And jiu-jitsu is kind of like the laid-back cousin of MMA. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the people are more chilled and like the drama's less. I say less, not to say there isn't any, but less. And so like we were in this position, right, where we wanted to have tournaments, which was awesome and very important. But we also like saw an opportunity to like really change the landscape. You know what I mean? Again, for like showcasing the crazy amount of talent we have, and put that on honestly at the time was like, put that on a stage for our people to see, not knowing, like, honestly, I think now our second biggest audience is the US. Like, I don't even know how that happened, to be honest. Like, I don't know how it works.
That's crazy, actually. Like, I didn't even know that, but that's
our second biggest audience is the US. So like these things just started happening, right? And like I think one thing about me and Justin is that it's always a progression. Nothing is ever, we've made it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, we're always trying to get better. And I think that's been right where this whole conversation started. It was like the pursuit in jiu-jitsu to get better. I'm still shit at jiu-jitsu, but promoting jiu-jitsu has gotten a lot better, So it's this quest again of like just getting better. Not the big difference, I think, for the two of us and everybody else is like, we're not, and the reality is we're not in it. We don't gain anything. You know what I mean? Like, I have to work every single night. I have to design shit, dude. If you told me 5 years ago I'd be designing TV graphics, I would have slapped you with a cucumber and told you to get on my ass. But that's the reality of where we is. Like, we do from head to toe a full TV production, 2 dummies, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know who put us in charge, but that's the way it is, you know? There's no gain for us. There's no financial gain. I think if people saw our books, I think they'd have a heart attack.
But you're saying that, like, I remember when Chris was fighting, it was a few months ago for the title. He was like, no, we're just going to come shoot some content here out of the gym. I was like, yeah, cool. And you rocked up with your camera. I was like, but dude, I saw you speaking on the stage.
Yeah.
So it's like the full on utility. It's like you editing, you at the podcast, you're busy.
That's the reality, dude. You remove the glitz and glam of it all, you know. But that's the reality of what's going on, dude. Like, obviously, I've been quite fortunate. I've got the mindset that I'll make something happen. You know what I mean? Like, if we have to enlist help, we'll enlist help. But I've got a reasonably broad skill set that gets us by. Justin's got a very good skill set that gets us by. So together we work, and we're very honest with each other to the point that honestly, you feel a lot of people, they think we want to kill each other half the time because we're like always at each other's throats, but that's just the way we are, you know what I mean?
Would you say your mindset's almost brick wall, just straight through?
It is and it isn't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm very brick wall on like getting the show to where I want it to be and getting the sport to where I think it should be for everybody's benefit. But I'm still like, there's still things that tick me off, and there's still things that like bother me personally, you know what I mean? Like, I always say, I'm like, if things are just done with a little bit of integrity and a little bit of respect across the board, I think we avoid 95% of things that bother people, you know? I'm very big on that. I try and I'm not innocent of that. I'm not perfect by any means. And neither is Justin. But like, I just feel there are you can say whatever you want about me personally. Like, I don't care about that. But if there's certain things that you'll do that'll show like a bit of disrespect, like that bothers me. And if it really bothers me, I'll say something about it. And if it doesn't really bother me, I'm kind of like,
let it flow. Yeah.
Let it flow, you know what I mean? Like, I try and, especially when it comes to a show like Submission Kings, you've got to remove yourself from a lot of things, you know what I mean? And you got to also try and understand other people's point of view and why they're doing things and saying things. And like we've come to learn, you know, there's pockets of people that will really just like a little bit of clout. They're never really going to show up. And initially you'd be like, oh, fuck these people now. Like, you got to go back and redo all of this stuff. Now it's just part and parcel. Like, we literally just had somebody get injured and pull out today. And I'm very sorry for that person. You know what I mean? Like, you know that it's legitimate, and like, sorry you had to go. And that person is literally putting their body on their line to come and perform on our show. And I love and respect that about people, you know? And we've got to go and do all of this back-end work that people don't understand. But then you get people that are just like, the second they've reached a point, like, you see I come and film, and like, you're getting ready, maybe you put their stuff out, and they're like, the day that happens, they pull out. So you're like, you know that person was just chasing that little bit of exposure, which is a bit annoying. But that's like, again, it's the 1% people, you know? But like, in the beginning, you're like, oh, this person, and now you're like, whatever, man. It's part of it.
Maturing,
you know what I mean?
with the business.
It's part of the game, right? Things happen, and things happen. We've had an 8-man where we've had to swap someone out 24 hours notice. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the way it goes. It's the sport. It's the nature of it, you know? So now I'm just like, I've also learned to have better contingencies in place. So like, give you an example. Whether the bantamweights can have an 8-man. I'm like, name me 16 high-level bantamweights. So like, why 16? Because I need 8. And then I need 8 replacements. You know what I mean? Like, that's the way it is. So yeah, like, back to the brick wall thing. I don't think anyone's 100% a brick wall. I think there's always going to be things that get to you. But yeah, we try our best, man. Like, and that ties in with me and Justin. Is like, I will do something or he'll do something, and like, it doesn't matter what's happening. Like, I'm going to tell him. I'm like, hey, man.
It's communication.
Yeah. No. And if we're arguing, it's because we want to fix it. It's not because we hate each other. You know what I mean? People are like, yes, the yokes are really arguing. Like, it's a joke now. You know?
No, yeah.
Or when the yokes going to start arguing, I'm like, probably in 2 minutes. Probably. You know?
But going back to that, you need to have that black and white and be able to say, yo, dude, this isn't working. That's cannons, but it is. 100%. No. Otherwise, you're not going to get to that whole, I've seen in my own personal business, ambiguity.
Yeah.
It's just going to be the point that's going to shut you down.
It has to be, right, man? And you like, if there's more than one of you involved in a business, you have to just be honest with each other. I think that's the whole reality of everything, is just be honest. Some people don't like that, you know what I mean? Like it's just the way it is, man. And honesty is going to hurt feelings at times, you know what I mean? That's just the reality of how these things go. But not to say that we're not like void of drama and chaos. It's part of everyday life, I think. But yeah, man, I don't think there's anybody's bricked off to absolutely everything. There's always going to be something that bothers you somewhere, you know?
I'm going to backtrack completely, and it's quite funny because you brought it up without even asking. When I messaged Chris, one of the things was, when are they going to have another gym quintet? And you brought it up.
Actually, funny enough, just sending a voice note on the way up here about that, in fact. I keep saying the next one. It's there's a couple of things going on, and I'll try and lay it out so it makes sense. And I've explained it to a few people. I think Justin kind of agrees, we overplayed the quintet a little bit. We've had quite a few. All of them have been entertaining, but it's like, so we skipped an event with a quintet, and we basically are trying to find a way to reinvigorate the quintet. Obviously, gyms like Krianja are a new way in the space. They're like post how we did our first event. And I'll tell you the biggest hurdle. The biggest hurdle now is like the next event is 5 July. I've already got a list of 18 fights that I'd like to put on that. And that's not even considering what happens now in April. You know what I mean? March. That's not even considering what happens in March, you know? So there's like this, all of a sudden we find ourselves in a position where it's like, in some ways we're obligated to showcase as many people as we can. And it's not really an obligation, it's something I've kind of forced upon myself. I know there's guys that I wanted on this card that I couldn't put on this card that I've already earmarked for the next one. Some of them are already like, we're trying to like map out the matches already. So the next event is already like getting full, you know what I mean? So it's like, where do we find space to put in quintets? Because we can only, like the last show I think ran just over 4 hours, which was probably a touch too long. This one's going to be even longer because we took a break, so we're coming back as hard as possible. So we're now trying to figure out how do we allocate the spacing for that quintet. So it is going to happen. There's going to be some changes to it, and we're just trying to like juggle exactly how we execute it, that it's effective. But yeah, I think before the next event, possibly the first leg at the next event. That's the plan right now, but we're still trying to iron out a couple of things. It's, like I say, we don't just okay, this one will be a quintet. So we think it out properly. But we've had the discussion already. We've got something in place. So you'll know more soon.
Hundreds. Tell me more the logistics of Sub Kings. How many events are you running a year?
So last year was supposed to be 9 in total. 8 is the magic number for us. So it's 4 tournaments, your everyday tournaments, and then 4 WTAs. We'd love to do more, but it's just like time consuming. There's a lot of money that goes into these things. The logistics is intense, man. It's what people don't quite realize. I think I go, like you say, from filming, building this whole thing up, cutting clips, doing. I mean, the guys who compete with us know, they see all of this stuff. I don't think they realize it's coming from the same source, you know what I mean? Like the schedule, the fight schedule, the running orders, like everything, to the point that on the night I'm with the director and I'm like discussing camera angles and how to like, I've learned a little bit, you know, like how to like close shots and where to, like, you got to understand also, you take traditional cameramen that have been doing football and cricket and rugby, and they've got to film something that they have no idea what they're looking at. Rugby, the ball goes, you follow the ball. You know what I'm saying? So like having to teach a cameraman, like follow the hands. That's the easiest way I can describe it, you know? Like wherever the hands are, that's the side of the camera needs to be. The director in the same boat. Okay, they've been with us a while now, so they understand. But it was this whole conversation on like, you guys are missing because you're filming at the back, but the choke's on the other side. And, you know, like figuring all of these things out. So when you talk about logistics, they're immense. Like people rock up, you know, and we don't have this like, exponential background in TV making and production and sporting events. It's stuff we've had to learn on the fly. And like I say, we've had a lot of good help. And then the tournaments is like, we would go to Durban. We played on the idea of going to Cape Town, but it's like you got to move 150 squares of mat and an entire warehouse of stuff, dude, from like pens to mats to warm-up mats to medals, podiums, back panners. We do entry bags. It's 300 plus entry bags, all of the stuff that's got to go in there, you know what I mean? Like all the advertising, marketing, it's it's a lot, dude.
And the Sub Kings team, how many guys are actually on the team? Like,
it's literally me and Justin and his assistant, who handle the legwork. But obviously, like when it comes to the tournaments, we've got someone that comes in and does our safety file for us, and then we've got refs that like work for us, and that's really it. Like a lot of like volunteers. We don't have volunteers. We pay everybody. That's our thing, But yeah, it's literally me and Justin and his assistant. That's really what gets it done. But like I said, obviously each step of the way, someone else comes in. So like we've got production team. We've got a production team that handles like the real back end of the production. And then we've got like a floor manager. But I'm coordinating all of this literally basically on my own. Like Justin handles a lot of like safety and security kind of stuff. And logistics, flights, bookings, hotels, paramedics, all of this kind of stuff. Whereas I'm like on the functioning of the actual show itself. And that's both ways for WTA and the actual. So like, then Smooth Comp is like a whole new thing. So I had to like kind of figure out how to operate Smooth Comp. And luckily, like a lot of good people have helped us along the way. And you have to learn. You've got to adjust and learn. And it's a small team, dude. It's
been,
it's a super
learning on the fly.
Yeah.
Just to give a better understanding. So you've given the JITSU, the MMA, how that founded. You said you played rugby in school.
Yeah.
What was that like? Did you have a formal background? Started out? Like, where did you actually start out? What was the goal?
You mean from
personal, like just...
Dude, honestly, like, I was what you would probably call a meathead in school, like, just an idiot. I thought rugby was life. I played a lot of cricket as well. But yeah, in my head, I think I was always going to play rugby somewhere, somehow,
What school were you at?
At Kes.
Oh, okay.
So, listen, dude, I think realistically, looking back, like knowing what you know now and what it takes to make it, you weren't even close, you know what I mean?
What year did you...
I finished 2003.
Oh, 3, okay.
So, like, I don't even think we had a gym in the school at that time.
The Rob Ray.
You know what I mean? Like, you would just play rugby. It's just what you did. Like, nobody lifted weights, or like maybe some folks took creatine.
Creatine.
That was like dodgy, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, they looked on the creatine, so it was like a very different time. It was a very different time. So, like, in my head, then I went to what was still Rao. We played for the Rao Rhinos at that time, which was cool because you had Mr. Price on your shorts and you thought you were the man, But it was like very obvious that if you couldn't speak a certain language and you were from a certain section of society, you weren't really going to get anywhere, And I dealt with that for 4 years, but I was kind of like just pig-headed, like just keep going. But also at the same time, like wasn't in the gym, wasn't like I was just playing rugby. I just thought that's what you did,
Lacing up and going.
Yeah, 100%. So then like it was in that situation where my parents had like almost in a way had very strongly suggested that I study. I studied sports psychology. I thought that was the right thing to do, but like there was no goal. There was
Rao, UJ.
Yeah. It became UJ.
Were you with Lombard, Latachan, those guys? Okay.
Correct. So like did that kind of stuff, ambled along, but I was also like, I was working in a gym as a personal trainer in accordance with what we were studying. Definitely wasn't for me. And then started working in like bars and stuff. That was my thing, you know what I mean? So I owned a bar business before that, and it was also kind of the same thing. Like it came naturally. That's just what I did. But there was never really like any. Like I say, like this isn't that story where I was like I was dreaming as a young boy.
It's just on the fly.
You know what I'm saying? It's just
cruising.
These things kind of happened organically. You know what I mean? Like everything started as like a passion projects really, and just kind of see how far it goes. I think with the mindset of like not really actually caring what happens, you know what I mean? Like you just do this because you enjoy it. And I think that's where things happen the most. I think that's where growth happens the most. You know, there's not like this pressure besides your wife asking you like, how much was that microphone you bought? And you're like, what microphone? I didn't buy any microphone. You know, but like literally the podcast, for example, this is a great analogy of like how my mind works. Started with the blog, typing, very, very clear that you should not be typing the English language. It's not for you, it's not for everybody. And I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. My wife just looked at me like, in passing, like, shake their head, like, whatever, dude.
Another one. Yeah,
so like, message, like, start Googling, you know, eventually found a place, spoke to a guy, and he's like, cool, I think what you need is a Scarlett mixer, these two mics, what. Dude, I have no idea what the soak's saying. I'm just like, cool, how much for that thing? Send me the price, EFT'd him the same day, and like 2 days later, my stuff arrived. Took all of the stuff to record my first podcast and didn't have the mixer plugged in. So literally recorded on the microphone on my laptop. Charlie Ray.
So, yes.
You know what I mean? So like that's how I was, you know what I mean? Like, and I think that's how I've always been. Like, to my benefit or my downfall is just like have an idea, just run with it, you know, and see where it goes. Sub Kings was exactly the same. Like literally sitting on top of a staircase, I'm like, I think we should do a quintet and I think we should stream it. And Justin was like, okay.
Sounds
you know what I mean? Like no idea of maths, no idea what we're going to do. Like literally our first maths was like, we had high density foam cut out to like place on top of a stage with the top because people told us it would work.
Yeah,
and it did work. You know, so like, that's just kind of how it's always been. Like I said, it's not that story of like a long dream of achievement, you know. Just kind of happened on the fly.
Tell me, which stood out there in La Oaks on creatine. So that's the stuff that interests me, honestly speaking. Yeah. All these athletes busy consuming their creatine daily. Jiu-jitsu, juice?
Look, dude, maybe I'm the wrong person to ask, but like, I mean, fuck, if it's going to make you better, do it. Why not? Yeah. And I'm saying, like, I saw one of the funniest jokes the other day. Like, you know, jiu-jitsu memes are always high quality. And it's that, I think it's that Skeletor dude. And he's like running forward in the cave. And he's like, if strength doesn't matter in jiu-jitsu, why are you so worried about steroids? And then it's him running out. You know what I mean? Like, so here's the thing. And I think someone explained this to me in jiu-jitsu terms. You get to, he was talking about the highest level, right? Like your Gordon Ryans and these kind of guys. And why are these oaks, I mean, I don't think it's a secret that Gordon's juiced to the gills, you know? Why is he, and everyone's like, you know, you're just a juice head or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but you still got to have the skills. It's like if you take steroids, for example, like you still got to go and do the work. It's not this like a software that you install via injection through the ass, you know what I mean?
No, that's exactly why I asked, because
there's this work that's got to go into this, you know? So the way they described it to me, like you get to the highest level, because I was intrigued. I was like, why are you lifting like that, for example? Why? Like, it seems crazy to me. They're like, dude, you got to understand, you get to a level, and you're talking about the highest level, right? That the skill level is going to be very similar. Everybody's going to be good. Everyone's going to be excellent. What's going to separate you? Maybe strength is an external factor. You know what I mean? Maybe a bit of explosiveness is another factor. You know, like these kind of things. Now these things become very important. And I think he's talking about the highest level, but I think throughout levels of competition, like let's say you get to like purple belt and you settle into your purple belt and everybody you're competing against is active purple belts and they're like, you know, they reach a certain level. What's going to separate you? You know what I mean? A bit of strength. Do I think everybody should be doing it? Probably not. But like, you know, if you're going to come and compete on a Saturday morning at Walter Sisulu Hall, I think maybe you can skip the juice. You know, I don't think you really need it.
No.
Like maybe leave it alone. But if you like want to go compete and win and podium at the ADCC, I mean, not to say that you should be doing it, but like it's not going to.
Not opposed to it. Yeah,
it's just like.
It's just interesting to see because you obviously get those guys, Walter Sisulu.
Look, the reality is, and I think some people are quite naive to how sports really works.
Yes.
You think Springboks are not taking extra testosterone?
I don't want to say it because I don't want to like, but
I mean, like, look at the size of the guys. Like,
from an ACL in like 3 months, and
you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's just like it's like the people that think that The Rock is not on steroids, like,
but he isn't.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's fairly obvious, But I'm like, do we really care? Like, he's not harming anybody.
No, completely.
Yeah, but I suppose it's like this connotation against always like steroids, you know what I mean? Like, and that's, I think, why The Rock is so like adamant to making sure that he never admits it. Although he kind of like, maybe he flirts a little bit, but I think there's like a connotation that people don't want to be associated to. I don't know, man. Look at jiu-jitsu, like a dude like Rosamond Paul Harris, who's like, just, obviously he's used to the gills, but he's just a bad person in terms of jiu-jitsu. Like, that dude would like get your ankle and just rip it, and even you tapping, he just keeps going, you know what I mean? So that connotation is like that crazy juice head. You know what I mean? Like,
he's
like,
just crazy before it. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I think jiu-jitsu has to take either a stand either way. Like, either we just like let it be. I think it's generally more accepted in jiu-jitsu as opposed to, like, because you're not hitting anybody in the head, for example. You know what I mean? There's no elbows or high kicks, or I think that's a bit different because the consequences are greater. Like, if somebody's like a bit juiced up and they strangle you, like, you get strangled, you know? If somebody's juiced up and they head kick you with a shin to the dome,
different story.
It's a different story, you know what I mean? Like,
the reason I asked, no, it was quite funny because when I was speaking to some jits guys,
yeah,
it was like, no, it's like the Juice Olympics, like you just but then again, talking about obviously those elite athletes but just to get a better understanding of what you've seen and just like,
I don't think, honestly, like, I don't think there's, I can't think of, nobody comes to mind where I'm like, woof, boys looking a bit saucy, you know what I mean? I don't think maybe with the like prevalence of like professional competition, that might change things. But I think the guys that are competing now have been doing so well for so long, like, I don't think there's a need.
No point, yeah.
Like I was saying, like the feedback that I got from like a very high level was kind of, it made sense to me, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. You're looking for like a strength advantage where you can. And if you're asking me personally, like, I'm not opposed to it. Like, I'm not going to say to you go and do it, but I'm going to be like, if you're doing it, like, good for you. You've also got to remember, like, I mean, I'm getting to that age now where things are getting hard, dude. You know what I mean? Things are getting hard, you know what I mean? Like, you're not waking up the way you used to. And if it's going to help you and it's going to keep you on the mat, why not? You know what I'm saying? Like, a bit of TRT here to keep you on the mat.
Completely, completely.
Like, it's there's so much more to jiu-jitsu. There's so much going on there for people, you know what I'm saying? Like, you spend a lot of time on the mats and it's giving a lot to a lot of people. Like, why take that away under the connotation of, that actually, he's on the TRT now, you know? That's probably doing more for him in that hour or 2 hours than anything else throughout the day. You know? It's a good thing. It's a therapeutic thing. People are in jiu-jitsu for a lot of reasons, you know? Some of them escaping a lot of demons, some of them dealing with a lot of things, some of them just enjoying. And either way, like, if there's something that can help you stay on the mat, like, I'm all for it, man. I don't think competition does get a bit grey, you know, but that meme sums it up for me. Like, if you're only, like, nobody complains when you're winning, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're beating juiced up dudes, you're not complaining. If you start losing, that's where the problem comes, right? So that's the thing. Like, I don't know, man. I think it is going to get to the point at the highest level where it's maybe getting a little bit out of hand, you know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't be looking like that, you know? So there is a line. But I think, like I was trying to say earlier, like, jiu-jitsu will have to take a stand one way or the other at some point. And you've seen the IBJJF trying to do that.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you've got dudes like Wagner Rocha and Cyborg, probably terrible examples, but they're hitting, like, they're in their mid-40s.
So, like you say, it's literally just to keep you healthy.
Yeah.
People don't realize.
Like, maybe, like, if the guys are entering like a Masters division, like a plus 40, maybe we can just be like, you know what, guys, you're free to do what you want to do, you know. But if you're like going to become a world champion by winning a gold medal at a massive tournament, our eyes are going to be on you. And I think that's happening for the most part. I don't think ADCC is but the ADCC realistically in this sport needs the biggest event with the most exciting jiu-jitsu with the most exciting athletes. Because the sport is so niche, we've got to turn eyes, you know what I mean? And we need things to be exciting. And I think that brings a bit of excitement, you know what I mean? The biggest, and I'm sorry if I like botch this, but the biggest live MMA event in the world was a KSW event. I don't know if you know much about KSW. So KSW is amazing. The Polish organization, really, really high level. That's where Drickus was a champion in KSW. But there's definitely how did they angle it? They call it like fun fights, right?
Okay.
Where it's like local rappers or like some famous dude or whatever. But these dudes are juiced to the absolute nines, dude. Like if they look sweats on you, you're gonna pop the next day. You know what I mean? Like these dudes are juiced up, man. And that's what brought eyeballs. Listen, their production is insane. The way they market is really high level, but people want to see that because it's exciting. You know what I mean? And you kind of like, everyone's like on the agreement where you're like, something weird going on here. And I think to some degree, perhaps that's happening at the ADCC as well. Maybe I could be completely wrong, but a bit of freak show, I think.
But yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's a business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So the CrossFit guys, you see them, they're looking all nice and lean and clean, but they're not going to go pop their top performers.
Yeah.
They'll use a few scapegoats just to kind of quiet the haters. But at the end of the day, it's a business that needs views, that needs traction. And
so I like that you bring up CrossFit because I'm like a sucker for good documentaries and especially involving sport. I'll watch anything. If it's around the Marble Olympics, I'm all in. And I watch all those CrossFit documentaries like Fittest on Earth, and eventually, look, dude, I'm not to the point where I know who all these people are.
Yes.
But there was a New Zealand kid who popped for steroids, and they were like, oh, he's on steroids? I'm like, come on, guys.
Come on, dude. Yeah,
Come
I know
on,
exactly what you're talking about.
Come on,
and
guys.
like, and then
We all know.
Yeah, and literally like, come on.
I love it so much. But like, again, the other side of that, it's the same like a Tour de France. And like, oh, that dude, I'm like, dude, you asking those guys to cycle 230 odd kilometers a day for 3 weeks. I'm like, dude, do that for one day and tell me how you feel. You know what I'm saying? Like, why are you asking these people to do the sport for everyone to watch on TV and then get upset
and then hate with it?
Yeah, because the dude had a little bit of oxygen in his blood. Like what did you think?
A little
like,
bit of oxygen.
Yeah.
That's it. I have heard that one, but
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I'm like, of course.
It was flowing nicely.
Of course they are. Like, you go and do that, bro. Like,
Bro,
I want to see you ride that distance.
Literally go up,
Yeah.
flipping Fisher's Hill, and you're sweating.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like a insane feat of human ability. CrossFit, like the CrossFit Games is like, you can't just go and do that. That takes years of getting right. You know what I'm saying? And like imagine going through all of that and you blow an ACL like 3 weeks out, but you still have to do that event. Of course, you're going to find ways to do it. Like, there's so much at stake. You, as a fan of that sport, have added that pressure, whether you know it or not, because you're like, oh, I can't wait to see whoever the top dog is in CrossFit now, to see this like perform. And he knows it. He's like, oh, my sponsors are expecting me to be there. Like, I got to make money. I got to have a living. Like, cool, I'm going to inject the stuff in my knee and I'm just going to call it a day. That's what's going to happen. You know what I mean? So like, as fans, we become like, it's almost like a lust for sport. You know what I mean? Like, we like become obsessed. We want to see these people do crazy things. And then you're like, oh, he's doing steroids. I'm like, yes, because he has to lift things across a field for 4 hours, and it's just not humanly possible. Maybe we should give it like a break.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
You know what I'm saying?
Either way, you.
Like, again, like on the consequence of sport, I think it's important.
Yes.
Like a dude doing 300 chin-ups and being on steroids is not going to affect anybody. You know what I mean? Especially if everybody is doing it, whether they admit it or not. You know what I'm saying? So like, I hear you, man. It's a crazy topic. A lot of people will think that we're probably crazy on it, but like, the reality is twofold: is that there's still work that has to be done, and that there's like, we want these people to do these crazy feats of human nature, but like, they must do it naturally. Like, you know, they must do it on steak and eggs. You know what I mean? Like,
no, completely. Jeez, but I'll thank you, honestly. Like, I don't think we'll definitely have you on again and speak, because I enjoyed that chat. Like, I was just completely immersed, and that pretty much covered only like a little bit, I guess. Yeah. And there's so much more. But bro, thanks honestly for jumping on the podcast and episode number 5.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me talk a lot of cuck to your people.
No, bro, it wasn't cuck, honest. But yeah, sweet, bro. Thank you.
Thank you, man. We'll see you around. Back on the mat at open mat.
Hopefully with that.